The billionaire's fiancé treated her abominably in front of everyone in the lobby, but when the maid raised her palm and uttered 6 gentle words, even the air froze, and deep down he wept inside. "Go back to work right now, instantly, you useless maid." Regina Caldwell's voice rebounded off the marble walls of the grand lobby at Belmont Manor, as though the grand house itself had received a scolding. 3 crystal glasses vibrated on the side table. A white rose fell from its vase onto the floor, yet Chloe Ross, standing in the middle of the room with a cloth in her hand and a damp silver tray pressed against her chest, did not take a single step back. Regina crossed the room in 4 long strides. The clatter of her heels echoed sharply on the polished floor, every step carrying the weight of weeks of accumulated contempt. Her cheeks were flushed, her voice strained, and her eyes burned with a familiar annoyance. Behind her, 2 guests who had just arrived for the engagement luncheon stopped dead in their tracks. A footman accidentally released his grip on a tray he was holding. Nobody moved to pick it up. "Are you deaf, woman? I told you to clean that hallway before my fiancé arrives, and here you stand, staring at me with that indifferent face." Chloe did not reply immediately. She lowered the tray carefully, placed it on the nearest table, and folded the cloth between her hands, slowly, like someone putting away a precious memory. Her fingers, toughened by years of honest work, did not tremble for a second. 10 meters away, hidden behind the frame of the front door that had just closed, Mr. Arthur Higgins tightened his lips. The head butler had served the Belmont family for 3 decades. He had seen the late Mr. Edward Belmont pass away. He had carried young Oliver in his arms when he was merely a child, and he had learned to read storms before they broke. The tension was not new. Regina Caldwell had spent weeks treating the staff with ice-cold disdain, but something about this morning made him break into a cold sweat. "Well?" Regina pressed, stepping within a meter of Chloe. "Are you going to speak, or will I have to ask Mr. Oliver to dismiss you this very afternoon? Because mark my words, my dear, a single word from me is enough. Just one. And by tomorrow, you won't find a single job left in this city." The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. An elderly woman wearing a pearl necklace worth more than the modest cottage where Chloe was born pressed her hand to her chest. A young man holding a notepad, hired to record the details of the engagement party, looked up slowly. His professional instinct told him this was turning into something much larger than a petty dispute. "Miss Caldwell," Chloe said finally, her voice so soft that everyone had to lean in to hear. "I finished cleaning the hallway 2 hours ago. If you wish, you may inspect it. It is spotless." "Don't you dare use that tone with me," Regina spat, bringing her face close to hers. "You are nobody here. You are part of the domestic staff, do you understand? The staff and servants do not talk back." Mr. Higgins closed his eyes. This was more than any human being ought to endure in silence. Yet he knew Chloe. He knew she never fought back. She had been working at the manor for 7 months and had never raised her voice, never arrived late, and never asked for a favor. She was discreet by choice, as if wishing to pass through the world without leaving a footprint. Regina thrust her hand forward authoritatively, a hand adorned with rings, perfumed and freshly manicured, pointing towards the exit in an eternal second. "One more word, and I swear you'll pack your things this very afternoon. One more word, and no one in this city will ever open their door to you again." It was then that Chloe did something no one expected. She raised her own hand slowly, palm open towards Regina, like someone asking the wind to stop. She did not shout, she did not recoil, nor did she defend herself with aggressive words. She simply held that modest, humble hand in the air between them and spoke 6 words. 6 words that would split the afternoon into 2 halves, the before and the after. "Your voice does not reach here." Regina blinked once, then twice, as if failing to comprehend. She lowered her hand, raised it again, and dropped it once more. She looked around at the guests, the footman, and the man with the notepad, as though waiting for someone to tell her she had misheard. But everyone was frozen. "What? What did you just say, maid?" "I said that your voice does not reach here, Miss Caldwell," Chloe repeated with the exact same composure. Her hand remained raised, palm open, her gaze calm, devoid of defiance, yet devoid of submission. You may scold me, you may reprimand me in front of whomever you please, you may order me to scrub the entire house with a small toothbrush. That is what I was hired for, and that is what I am paid to do. But there is a place inside me where your voice cannot enter. That place does not belong to you. It belongs to my mother and to God and to no one else. The silence that followed was so heavy that the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner echoed clearly through the hall. The white rose on the floor rolled 2 centimeters further. "How dare you!" Regina gasped, recovering from the shock. Her voice cracked in a high pitch, like a crystal glass fracturing from within while barely holding together. "How dare you, a servant girl, a cleaner, talking to me about your mother as if I cared? Your mother was probably just another woman scrubbing floors for decent people, and now you pretend—" "Do not speak of my mother, Miss Caldwell." Chloe did not raise her voice, but something in her tone shifted, and everyone felt it. Even Regina, even the guests, even the clock, which seemed to hesitate for a second before ticking again. "Do not speak of my mother ever again, please." The word please fell like a heavy stone onto the marble, without violence, but with a weight that severed the atmosphere. It was at that exact second that the grand front door opened and firm footsteps echoed across the lobby. Oliver Belmont had just arrived from the office. He held a bouquet of white orchids in his hand, a warm smile on his lips, his tie loosened against the afternoon warmth. He had come to dine with his fiancée to celebrate their upcoming engagement, completely unaware that he was about to witness a scene that would rewrite everything he believed. He stopped 3 meters away from the 2 women, orchids suspended mid-air, his smile frozen. "Regina, what is going on here?" Regina turned to him as if rescued from the bottom of a well. Her expression transformed in a fraction of a second. Her cheeks shifted from angry crimson to victimized pink. Tears materialized in her eyes like magic, and her voice softened into honey. "Darling, oh darling, you're here. Look at how this servant spoke to me. She humiliated me right in front of your guests. Oliver, this woman cannot stay here a moment longer. I want her out of this house right now." Oliver glanced at the guests. The woman in pearls lowered her head. The man with the notepad stared intently at his notes, as if deeply absorbed. Nobody said a word. "Chloe," Oliver asked, turning to her, "is this true?" Chloe did not answer right away. She lowered her raised hand, letting it rest gently at her side, and only then looked Oliver in the eye. "Mr. Belmont, I did not disrespect Miss Caldwell. I raised my hand to ask her in silence not to step any closer. If that is an offense, you may fire me. If that is a mistake, you may fire me. If the truth makes you uncomfortable, you may fire me. But I will not lie to you today or ever." Oliver stood motionless, staring at her as though seeing her for the very first time in 7 months. Until today, Chloe Ross had been nothing more than an efficient shadow to him, a woman who folded his towels with flawless corners, a servant who never made eye contact. And now she stood before him, head held high, meeting his gaze without flinching, without apologizing, without trembling. Something shifted deep inside him, something ancient, long buried. "Oliver!" Regina protested, noticing his hesitation. "Don't tell me you are going to believe a servant over me. After everything I am to you, after all our plans, this woman is lying and you are leaving her standing in my house." "It isn't your house yet, Regina." The words escaped Oliver's mouth before he even registered them. They spilled out on their own, like a truth that had been waiting for a corridor through which to escape. Regina opened her eyes wide. The guests gasped. Mr. Higgins, concealed behind the doorframe, widened his eyes. "What? What did you say?" "I said that it isn't your house yet. And I said that before I fire anyone, I am going to understand what happened here." Oliver walked over to a leather chair in the lobby. He placed the orchids carefully over the backrest, as if the flowers were innocent. He untied his tie completely and looked at Chloe again. "Chloe, please step into the library with me. I want to speak with you." "Oliver!" Regina shrieked, her face tense. And you, Regina, wait here. Go up to your room or do as you wish. But right now, I am going to speak with her." Regina stood slack-jawed. Her makeup began to run. Real tears this time, unacted. The man with the notebook, unnoticed by anyone, had been scribbling down every single detail in silence. The guests retreated into the garden under the pretense of needing fresh air. The woman in pearls whispered to her husband, "Something momentous is about to happen in this house. I feel it in my soul." Chloe walked behind Oliver towards the library. Her footsteps sounded upon the marble like burdens being lifted from her shoulders, like a silent prayer finally finding a place to land. Mr. Higgins, still hidden, watched them pass. Then, for the first time in 30 years, the old butler crossed himself slowly, from forehead to chest, shoulder to shoulder, muttering an ancient prayer under his breath. For he, better than anyone, had seen something in Chloe Ross's face that morning that no one else had noticed. That woman had not come to Belmont Manor by chance. She was here for a reason, and that reason had a name Mr. Higgins kept handwritten in an old leather notebook locked inside his bedside drawer. A name he had sworn never to utter before the late master's tomb, but which now made his heart tremble like a frightened bird. "May God help us," the old butler whispered, closing his eyes. "For the truth has just set foot in this house, and when the truth arrives late, it always comes seeking what belongs to it." Out in the garden, while the guests conversed in hushed tones, an elderly woman leaning on a walking stick looked up at the library windows where the velvet curtains had just been drawn. She shook her head slowly. "Poor boy," she murmured, without anyone understanding whom she meant. "Poor boy. What he is about to discover." Her husband looked at her, bewildered. "What are you talking about, my dear? Whom are you calling a boy?" But the old woman did not answer. She kept her eyes fixed on the closed curtains as though she knew something, as though an ancient story had just awakened in that house after many long years. The library at Belmont Manor smelled of old oak, aged leather, and antique ink. The heavy velvet curtains hung half open, allowing a shaft of golden light to fall directly across the center of the rug. Oliver closed the door behind him. The click of the latch echoed clearly. He walked to the window, stared out at the garden for a moment where the guests hovered, and then turned to face Chloe. She remained standing in the middle of the room, hands neatly crossed in front of her. She did not look at the expensive books, the luxurious furniture, nor at the master of the house. Her eyes were fixed on a spot on the floor, trying not to think. "Chloe, please sit down." "I prefer to stand, Mr. Belmont, if you don't mind." Oliver took a deep breath. He walked over to the nearest leather armchair, but did not sit. Resting his hands on the backrest, he looked at her. The light caught Chloe's tied-back hair, and for the first time in 7 months, Oliver realized that this woman had a face, not a role, not a uniform, but a face that carried a profound weight. "Chloe, what happened out there was not right. On Regina's part, I mean. I heard everything from the hallway before coming in. It isn't the first time she has mistreated the staff, but this time was different." Chloe did not answer. She merely offered a slight nod. "I wish to apologize on behalf of this house, and on my own." Those words caused Chloe to raise her eyes. She looked at him, and in her eyes was something Oliver could not identify. It wasn't gratitude, nor was it resentment. It was a long-standing sorrow that had finally found a crack through which to breathe. "You do not need to apologize, Mr. Belmont. You did not raise your voice. You did not mistreat me. You simply arrived home." "But I am engaged to the woman who did, and that makes me responsible." Chloe lowered her gaze again and swallowed hard. Oliver noticed for the first time that her eyes glistened, not with tears about to fall, but with tears that had already fallen 1,000 times before in quiet rooms, leaving a watery light that some women inherit after weeping in silence. "Mr. Belmont, if you brought me in here to fire me, please do it quickly. I must return home before dusk." "I did not bring you here to fire you." "Then why did you bring me here?" Oliver hesitated. He walked over to the antique desk where his father used to write family letters and picked up a framed photograph that had rested there forever. An old picture of a man with a neat moustache staring solemnly into the camera. He held it for a moment, searching the dead man's eyes for an answer, before placing it back down. "I brought you here because I need to know who you are." "Pardon me?" "I have spent 7 months walking past you without seeing you, as if you were just another piece of furniture. But today, when you raised your hand, when you spoke those 6 words, I heard something. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it sounded so familiar, but something in your voice, in the way you stood your ground, reminded me of someone. And I need to understand who that person is, because ever since I walked into the lobby an hour ago, I cannot shake this feeling from my chest." Chloe stood motionless. For a brief second, her composure faltered, like a candle flickering before going out. But she quickly gathered herself. "Mr. Belmont, I am an employee. I clean your floors, I fold your towels, I polish your silver. That is all you need to know about me." "That is precisely what is no longer enough for me, Chloe." A long silence settled between them. The grandfather clock measured the seconds with iron patience. Outside, someone laughed softly in the garden, a laughter completely out of tune with the atmosphere inside. "Where were you born?" Oliver asked finally. "In a small village most people have forgotten. Oakhaven, in the northern hills." Oliver froze. He let go of the armchair and took an involuntary step towards her. "Oakhaven?" "Yes, sir, near the River Swale." Oliver pressed a hand to his forehead. He walked to the window, turned around, and walked back, as if his legs were failing him. Chloe watched him, confused. "Is something wrong, sir?" "My father was born there." Chloe did not answer. She did not gasp or show surprise. She merely nodded softly, as if she had already known this information. "My father was born in Oakhaven," Oliver repeated, as if speaking to himself. "He spent his early childhood there. My grandmother brought him to the city when he was 9, after my grandfather died. They lived in a tiny room above a bakery for years, until he found work in a textile warehouse. That warehouse was the beginning of everything, of the Belmont Group, this manor, all of it." He finally sat down on the edge of the armchair. "And why did you come to this city?" "My mother fell ill. There was no proper care for her there. I brought her here several years ago. We lived in a rented room in the East End. I worked whatever jobs I could find, washing, ironing, caring for the elderly, until..." "Until what?" "Until she passed away." Oliver closed his eyes. The words fell between them like a dry leaf, soft, inevitable, and heavy. "I am so sorry, Chloe. Truly." "Thank you, sir." "How long after that did you come to work here?" "Not long. The agency offered me several placements. I chose this one." "Why this one?" Chloe remained silent. Her fingers intertwined in front of her, her short, clean, unpainted nails pressed tightly together. "Because my mother, before she died, asked one thing of me." "What thing?" "That I come to this house." The silence that followed was so profound that Oliver heard the clear beating of his own heart. The answer made no sense. It opened a door to a corridor he had never seen, one he was not prepared to walk down. "What do you mean?" "On her deathbed, my mother asked me that once she was gone, I should apply for work at Belmont Manor. She told me not to ask questions, not to reveal who I was, but simply to enter, do my work in silence, and wait." "Wait for what?" "She didn't tell me, sir. She only said, 'Wait, you will know when the time comes.'" Oliver stood up and stepped closer, stopping a meter away. His eyes brimmed with an emotion resembling grief. "Chloe, did your mother know someone in this family?" "I do not know, sir. She never explained. I asked her 1,000 times right up until her final day, but she always said it wasn't the time, that the truth has its own clock." "And you didn't press her?" "I did. And the only answer she gave me before closing her eyes for the last time was one word. Just one." "Which word?" Chloe raised her eyes, looked directly at him, and spoke with the exact same quiet calm she had used in the lobby. "Forgiveness." Oliver felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. He had to brace himself against the armchair once more. Forgiveness? Your mother said forgiveness before she died? Yes, sir. Forgiveness. To whom? I do not know. Have you no idea, Chloe? No suspicion, no letter, no photograph? Chloe hesitated. Her lips tightened, her fingers twisted together, and then, after a moment that felt endless, she whispered, I have one thing, sir, but I keep it locked in my room. What thing? A sealed envelope. My mother instructed me never to open it, only to hand it over when I knew whom to give it to. And you still don't know? No, sir, not yet. A long silence swallowed the library. Chloe, Oliver's voice was hoarse, almost broken. When your shift ends today, could you bring that envelope to me? Chloe looked at him, fear flickering in her eyes, not fear of him, but of whatever lay hidden inside that paper. Are you certain, Mr. Belmont? I am certain. Even if whatever is inside changes everything? Even if it changes everything. Chloe lowered her gaze and gave a slow nod. Very well, I will bring it to you tonight. At that moment, 3 sharp knocks sounded on the library door. Mr. Higgins entered without waiting for permission. His face was pale, and he held a silver tray bearing a glass of water, as if needing something to hold to keep his hands from shaking. Forgive me, young master. Miss Regina is outside. She demands to speak with you urgently. She says it is important. Tell her to wait, Higgins. Young master, tell her to wait. Mr. Higgins bowed his head. His eyes briefly met Chloe's, and in that fleeting glance passed something neither wished to name, a question, a suspicion, a recognition that could not yet be spoken. As you wish, sir. The butler withdrew, closing the door as softly as one closes the door to a sick room. Oliver turned back to Chloe. I must ask one more thing before you leave today. Yes, sir? Do not tell anyone about this conversation. No one. Not your colleagues, not even Higgins. I had no intention of doing so, sir, but may I ask why? Oliver stepped towards the window. Outside, Regina was pacing among the rose bushes, speaking animatedly on her mobile phone. She did not glance towards the library once. Because there are people in this house, Chloe, who have been waiting for a moment like this for many years, and I do not want them to know just yet. What moment, sir? Oliver turned around. Half his face was bathed in sunlight, the other half swallowed by shadow, as though 2 different men resided within his body, and only one was still standing. The moment when the truth arrives at the door, and no one is ready to open it. Chloe stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Until tonight, Mr. Belmont. Until tonight, Chloe. She walked towards the door, stopping just before exiting without turning around. Sir? Yes? The envelope. It has a mark on the outside, a drawing made in old ink. My mother drew it herself with her left hand, because her right was already paralyzed. What drawing is it? A 5-pointed star with a letter inside. Which letter? Chloe took a deep breath and spoke so softly Oliver had to lean forward to catch it. The letter B, sir. Oliver felt something shatter inside his chest, millimetre by millimetre, like glass breaking from within. B for Belmont? Yes, sir. The letter B of your family name. Chloe slipped out of the library, leaving Oliver Belmont standing amongst his father's inherited books, consumed by the unmistakable realization that the woman he had considered invisible for 7 months was, in truth, the keeper of a secret that would divide his life forever. In the kitchen at the rear of the manor, a young scullery maid who had overheard Regina's final words on the phone while carrying trays to the garden dropped a teacup onto the floor. The cup did not break, but the girl's face went white. Regina had said into her phone, "Don't worry, I'll deal with her, just like we got rid of the other one." The afternoon dragged on, as if the sky itself knew something momentous was brewing inside Belmont Manor and wished to linger a little longer. Chloe finished her shift while the sun still hovered above the garden walls. She gathered her belongings in silence, offered a brief goodbye to her co-workers, and walked out through the staff exit at the back of the estate, She boarded the red double-decker bus, crossed the city, and got off at the corner of her East End neighborhood. She climbed the narrow staircase leading to her small rented room. Every step felt heavier than usual. She entered, locked the door, and stood in the middle of the room for several minutes without moving, looking at her made bed, the small framed print of the Virgin Mary her mother had hung on the wall, and the rickety wooden bedside table with the drawer. That drawer. She opened it slowly, taking out a bundle wrapped in old cloth and tied with a worn cord. She laid it on the bed, sitting down on the edge with her knees together. She untied the string. Inside the cloth was a thick, cream-colored envelope. Drawn in the center was a five-pointed star in old, faded ink, and in the heart of the star was a single letter, B. Chloe traced her fingers over the drawing, as if touching the cheek of someone long gone. Tears streamed down her face silently. No sobbing, no wailing, just quiet tears falling one after another onto the paper. And then she remembered. She remembered the hospital room where her mother had spent her final days. She remembered the smell of antiseptic and cold soup. She remembered the night nurse who allowed her to stay past visiting hours because she understood the fragile woman in the bed would not see the dawn. She remembered her mother's weightless hand gripping hers with the final strength she possessed. "My girl, listen to me carefully. When I am gone, you must seek employment at Belmont Manor. Do you hear me? Belmont Manor, in Surrey. Nowhere else. That house." "Mum, please don't talk like that. Listen to me, I have no time left. You ask no questions. You tell no one who you are. You go in, do your work, and wait. Promise me." "I promise, Mum. But wait for what?" "You will know when, my darling. You will feel it right here." She had touched her daughter's chest with a trembling finger. "The day you feel the moment has come, hand this envelope to the master of the house. Only to him. Promise me." "I promise. But what is inside, Mum?" And then her mother had done that tragic thing, a memory Chloe would carry for the rest of her life. Her mother had smiled, a frail, exhausted smile across dry, cracked lips, a smile that seemed to beg forgiveness for something she could not name. "Inside is a forgiveness, my darling, a forgiveness I never had the courage to ask for in life, but which I cannot carry to my grave." "A forgiveness? To whom, Mum?" And her mother had only squeezed the envelope against her daughter's chest, whispering in a dying voice, "Forgiveness," before closing her eyes forever, finally allowing herself to rest after carrying an unbearable weight for so many years. Chloe remembered it all as she sat on the edge of the bed. She wept softly for a long time. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand, placed the envelope inside her canvas bag, stood up, and left. The bus ride back to Belmont Manor was quiet. Chloe pressed her forehead against the window pane. Outside, London's brick buildings blurred past. Inside, her chest was a knot of anxiety. Something told her that after she delivered this envelope, her life would never be the same again. At the manor, the light in the library remained on. Oliver had dismissed the dinner guests with polite excuses and asked Regina to retire to her quarters. Regina had thrown a tempestuous tantrum, weeping dramatically and threatening to leave him forever. But seeing that he wouldn't even look at her, she had locked herself in the upstairs bedroom, slamming the door hard. Mr. Higgins entered the library quietly, bearing a silver tray with hot tea and biscuits. "Young master." "Thank you, Higgins." "Young master, may I speak with you for a moment?" "Go ahead." The old butler clasped his hands in front of his body. His fingers were trembling slightly. Oliver noticed it. In 30 years, he had never seen Arthur Higgins tremble. "Young master, the girl, Miss Chloe, her surname, Ross. Does it mean anything to you?" Oliver frowned. "It shouldn't. Why?" Mr. Higgins looked down at the polished floorboards, took a deep breath, and finally spoke with the voice of a man unburdening himself of a weight held for 3 decades. "Your late father, sir, Mr. Edward Belmont, on the night he passed away in this very room, made a request of me. He made me promise something that I failed to honor." "What request?" He asked me that if ever a person named Ross came to this house, I was to inform his heir immediately. To inform you, sir. Not to let a single day pass. He said it was vital. Higgins, she has been working here for 7 months. Why didn't you tell me? Forgive me, sir. I did not know. When she arrived through the agency, I didn't review the paperwork personally. Miss Regina handled the interviews. It was only today, seeing how she stood in the lobby, hearing how she spoke of her mother. Something prompted me to check the staff files, and I saw the name Ross. I realized your late father would forgive me for being late, sir, but hopefully not too late. Oliver sat down, placing his head in his hands. Did my father ever explain why? No, young master. He only said, Higgins, if anyone with that name arrives, my son has a right to know what I never had the courage to tell him. Oliver remained silent for a long while. Then he stood up and walked to the window. Higgins, go and get some rest. I will remain in the library tonight. When Chloe arrives, show her in, and then retire to your quarters. What is spoken here tonight must not be heard by anyone. Do you understand? I understand, sir. And thank you for listening, even if it comes late. The old butler bowed his head and left, closing the door behind him. Chloe arrived at the manor just as the clock in the hall struck 9. Mr. Higgins guided her to the library without a word. He opened the door, met her gaze for a brief second, offered a gentle nod, and withdrew. Inside, Oliver was waiting by the desk. Chloe walked to the center of the rug, pulled the cloth bundle from her bag, and placed the cream envelope on the desk, extending it to Oliver with both hands. Oliver took it. His fingers brushed hers for a fleeting second, sending a sudden chill through both of them, as if two loose threads from a forgotten past had finally reconnected. Oliver sat in his leather chair. Chloe sat on a small stool across the desk. Oliver traced the drawing of the star and the letter B. His eyes filled with tears he did not bother to hide. This was the seal my father used on his personal correspondence in his youth, he said, his voice cracking. A 5-pointed star with our family initial. My grandfather designed it. I thought this seal died with my father. My mother drew it with her left hand, Chloe said quietly. Her right was paralyzed. Your mother knew my father, Chloe. I do not know, sir. Did she ever speak of him? Mention a name? Never. She took almost everything to her grave. She left me only this envelope and the word forgiveness. Oliver opened the envelope slowly. The paper creaked. Inside were several folded sheets of paper and a photograph. The photograph fell onto the wooden desk first, an old black-and-white picture with yellowed, wavy edges. It showed a young, radiant woman sitting on a park bench. Her hand rested gently on the shoulder of a handsome young man sitting beside her. The man wore a tailored suit and a felt hat, smiling at her with a warmth no man shows a mere acquaintance. Oliver looked at the photograph, and the blood drained from his face. Chloe? Yes, sir. This woman in the picture, is she your mother? Yes, sir. That is my mother when she was young. And the man beside her? Chloe leaned over the desk to look. She had never seen the picture before. Her mother had kept it hidden inside the envelope. I don't know, sir. I have never seen him. Oliver picked up the photo with trembling hands, holding it to the lamplight, turning it over. On the back, written in elegant cursive, was a short message. For my Martha. Yours forever, Edward. Oliver dropped the photo onto the desk and buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Mr. Belmont, what is it? Who is Edward? Oliver uncovered his face. Tears flowed unchecked down his cheeks. Edward Belmont was my father, Chloe. He was my father. The silence that followed was suffocating. Chloe felt her stomach twist. Her hands began to tremble. But, sir, I am my mother's only child. I have no siblings. I would have known. Chloe, read this. Look at the date. Oliver handed her the second letter. The date at the top was from decades ago, when her mother was her age, long before Chloe was born, back in Oakhaven. It wasn't you, Chloe, Oliver whispered, his voice broken. It was another child, a baby, before you. Chloe pressed her hand to her heart. I had a brother. Yes, Oliver wept. We had a brother. My father had a child with your mother before he was forced to marry my mother for family status, and neither of our parents ever told us. They stared at each other across the desk, tears streaming down both their faces, two people realizing that the lives they had lived were built upon carefully guarded secrets. Oliver picked up the third letter. The paper was creased, the ink smudged in places as if wept over while being written. My Martha, the child has fallen gravely ill. Mrs. Hope wrote to me yesterday. The fever will not break. He needs a doctor from the city. My father still lives. If I return to the village, he will discover everything and destroy us. But I cannot let our boy die. Forgive me, Martha. I am sending a physician under the guise of visiting a relative. Please hold on. Do not let our sweet boy go. Oliver put the letter down, walked to the window, and wept openly. He wept for a father he had known only as distant and stern, a father who had carried a secret anguish all his life. He wept for a brother he had never embraced, and for a woman his father had loved, yet been forced to abandon. Chloe stepped towards him. Mr. Belmont, do you know what happened to the baby? Oliver turned around, shaking his head. I don't know, Chloe. The letters end there. There must be something else. Oliver turned back to the desk, picking up the empty envelope and shaking it. Something small, silver, and metallic slid out, rolling across the mahogany wood. Chloe picked it up. It was a tiny baptismal medal inscribed on the back. Julian, son of Martha. May God protect him. Julian, Oliver whispered. My brother's name was Julian. My brother, Chloe breathed. I swear to you, Chloe, Oliver said, gripping her hands. I swear on the memory of our parents that I will find out what became of Julian. At that moment, 3 frantic knocks rattled the library door. Mr. Higgins rushed in, his face ghostly white. Young master, forgive me, but Gemma, the scullery maid, has just come running from the kitchen. She heard something. Something you must know tonight. What is it, Higgins? Miss Regina, sir. Gemma overheard her on the phone earlier today. She was speaking to a man who works closely with this estate. Who? Mr. Higgins swallowed hard. Mr. Nicholas Vance, sir, your cousin. Oliver felt the blood run cold again. Nicholas? Regina was talking to Nicholas? Yes, sir. And from what Gemma gathered, they have known each other for years. Long before Miss Regina ever met you. Chloe gasped. Oliver leaned heavily against the desk. There is more, sir, Higgins added gravely. Gemma heard Miss Regina say, Don't worry, darling. Tomorrow at noon, old Edward's will is going to appear, and Oliver won't inherit a single penny. Everything will be ours, just as we planned. Before anyone could process the revelation, a soft, rhythmic tapping sound echoed down the hallway outside. Tap, tap, tap. A walking stick striking the wooden floor, approaching unhurriedly. Mr. Higgins turned towards the door. Sir, are you expecting anyone else tonight? No one. The tapping stopped right outside the door. Then a woman's voice, aged, firm, and resonant, called out, Mr. Belmont, it is I, the woman with the walking stick from the garden this morning. Please open the door. I have waited decades for this moment. Mr. Higgins opened the door. An elderly woman stepped inside. She had snow-white hair styled in a neat bun, eyes bright and alert despite her aged face. She leaned on a dark wooden cane topped with a worn silver handle. She walked straight to Chloe, gazing at her with tears spilling over her cheeks. My dear child, how much you look like your mother. How very much. Chloe was bewildered. Madam, who are you? Did you know my mother? The woman offered a faint, ancient smile. My dear girl, I am Mrs. Agnes Hope, the midwife from Oakhaven who brought your brother Julian into this world, the woman who held the child your father was never allowed to meet. Oliver stepped forward. Mrs. Hope, my father mentioned you in his letters. How did you come to be in my garden today? I have watched this house from afar for years, young Belmont, Mrs. Hope explained softly. On your birthdays, on the anniversary of your father's death, I stood on the avenue, waiting for the right moment. When I learned a girl named Ross had taken a position here, I knew the time was near. I used an old acquaintance, the lady in pearls at your luncheon, to gain entry today. Mr. Higgins bowed his head. Mrs. Hope, if I had spoken sooner— No, Higgins, Mrs. Hope interrupted gently. Everything has its appointed time, and the time is now. Oliver sat down, overwhelmed. Mrs. Hope, the letters end when my father tried to send a doctor to Oakhaven for little Julian. Did he survive? Mrs. Hope gripped her cane, her voice trembling. The doctor arrived too late. The heavy rains had washed away the river bridge. By the time he crossed, the child had suffered 3 days of raging fever. We thought we were going to lose him. Chloe covered her mouth. Oliver closed his eyes. But then, Mrs. Hope continued, her eyes lighting up, a miracle happened. A woman passing through the village, a trained nurse travelling with her husband, a textile merchant, heard of the dying baby. She brought a modern medicine that had just arrived in the cities. She treated little Julian, and by the next morning his fever broke. He survived. Chloe wept freely now. Oliver reached out and held his sister's hand. If he survived, Oliver asked breathlessly, where is he now? Why did my father never know? Mrs. Hope sighed deeply. Because the nurse and her husband could not have children of their own. Your mother, exhausted, impoverished, and terrified of what the old Mr. Belmont would do if he found the boy, made the ultimate sacrifice. She gave Julian to that couple to raise as their own, far away, under a new name, so he might have a safe and peaceful life. My mother gave him away, Chloe whispered. She saved him, my child, but she paid for it with a broken heart every day of her life. That is why she sent you here, so that the truth might finally be restored. Oliver looked up. Mrs. Hope, do you know the name of the family who took him? The old woman took a worn notebook from her pocket and opened it. Their surname was Vance. They renamed the boy Matthew Vance. Oliver stood frozen, his jaw dropping. Matthew Vance? He rushed to his desk, pulled open a drawer, and snatched an address book, turning to a card clipped inside. Mrs. Hope, is this him? Mrs. Hope peered at the card, tears welling in her eyes. Yes, my dear, that is Julian. I would recognize those eyes anywhere. Chloe looked at the card. It was an elegant business card reading, Matthew Vance, Principal Legal Counsel, Belmont Group. Good heavens, Oliver gasped. Matthew Vance is the head solicitor for the Belmont Group, the man my father appointed to manage our estate, and the man scheduled to meet here tomorrow at noon. Mr. Higgins gasped. Sir, Miss Regina called that meeting 3 days ago. It's a trap, Oliver realized, the pieces falling into place. Regina and Nicholas plan to present a forged will to Matthew tomorrow, forcing him to sign over the estate before he even knows who he is. Mrs. Hope stood tall, leaning on her cane. Then we cannot wait until tomorrow, children. We must reach Matthew tonight. We must tell him who he is before he signs a single piece of paper. Within hours, the plot unfolded with breathtaking speed. Oliver, Chloe, and Mrs. Hope drove straight to Matthew Vance's London apartment, arriving before dawn. When Matthew opened the door to find his client, a maid, and an old woman standing in his hallway at 3:00 a.m., he was stunned. Inside the flat, over hot tea, Mrs. Hope laid out the entire truth, the letters, the baptismal medal, the adoption records from St. Jude's Refuge, and the secret monthly payments Edward Belmont had sent to the Vance family for years, recorded in Higgins's leather ledger. Matthew listened in stunned silence. When the story finished, he walked to the window, looking out over the sleeping city. All my life, I felt a missing piece, he murmured. He turned around, looking at Oliver and Chloe. Brother, sister. The 3 siblings embraced in the middle of the room, tears washing away decades of separation and secrecy. Matthew immediately examined the forged will that Regina had sent him earlier that week. With his trained legal eye, he spotted the flaws instantly. It's a forgery, Matthew declared. The Belmont seal, the star with the letter B, was drawn left to right. Our father was left-handed. He always drew it right to left. Whoever forged this was right-handed. Furthermore, the clauses were drafted using modern legal software that didn't exist when Edward Belmont supposedly wrote it. Meanwhile, back at the manor, Gemma and Higgins received a call from Lucy, a former kitchen maid whom Regina had wrongfully dismissed months ago. Lucy provided an audio recording she had secretly taken on her phone, catching Regina and Nicholas discussing their plan to disinherit Oliver and eliminate Lady Beatrice, Edward's gentle second wife, who had been quietly moved to a cottage outside town. By 11:30 a.m. the following morning, the grand boardroom at Belmont Manor was filled. Regina Caldwell arrived in a striking red dress, radiating triumph, accompanied by Nicholas Vance. They believed victory was within their grasp. "Everything is set, my love," Regina whispered to Nicholas. "Once Matthew validates the will, Oliver will be ousted." They walked into the boardroom, only to find the entire board of directors assembled, alongside Oliver, Chloe, Mrs. Agnes Hope, Mr. Higgins, Lady Beatrice, Gemma, and Jack Sterling, an investigative journalist who had attended the engagement party disguised as a notepad photographer. And standing at the head of the table was Matthew Vance. Regina's smile vanished. What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning, Regina," Oliver said calmly, "is that my father's true intentions have been revealed, and the fake will you and Nicholas manufactured is completely useless." Matthew stepped forward, laying out the legal evidence, the expert handwriting analysis, the audio recording, and the official adoption records proving his own identity as Edward Belmont's eldest son. "Miss Caldwell, Mr. Vance, the police are waiting downstairs." Nicholas attempted to bolt for the door, but two police officers stepped inside, blocking his exit. Regina collapsed into a chair, trying to squeeze out tears. "Oliver, darling, it's a mistake. I love you. I was manipulated." Oliver looked at her with quiet pity. "You never loved me, Regina. And today, a humble woman with a cloth in her hand taught me what it truly means to hold up a hand and say, 'Your voice does not reach here. You may leave on your own feet or in handcuffs.'" Regina and Nicholas were escorted from the premises by the police to face charges of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. In the weeks that followed, Belmont Manor was officially renamed Martha House, transformed by Oliver, Chloe, and Matthew into a sanctuary and foundation supporting underprivileged mothers and children. St. Jude's Refuge was expanded, and Mrs. Agnes Hope moved into a cozy cottage on the estate grounds. Lady Beatrice returned to the main house, cherished as a grandmother by all three siblings. Mr. Higgins eventually retired with full honours, though he continued to enjoy afternoon tea in the gardens every day. One sunny afternoon, Chloe sat on a stone bench beneath the ancient oak tree in the garden, holding little Julian's silver baptismal medal in her hand. Oliver and Matthew sat on either side of her, while Mrs. Hope and Lady Beatrice watched from the terrace. Chloe looked up at the sky, holding the medal tightly against her heart, and whispered softly, "Mum, the room inside me is no longer empty. It is full of love, full of family, forever." The gentle English breeze rustled the oak leaves above, as if the universe itself had finally closed a long-forgotten book, proving that dignity cannot be bought, the truth never expires, and love will always find its way home, just in time.